Welcome, everyone. I'm Judy Moranoff, and I chair the Education Committee for the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County, a nonpartisan organization that does not endorse candidates who support political parties. In accordance with our mission to empower voters and defend democracy, we sponsor webinars like this one to inform the public on important issues. Tonight's webinar is entitled Closing the Achievement Gap in Montgomery County Public Schools, Probability or Pipe Dream. The academic achievement gap in Maryland public schools is well documented. The blueprint for Maryland's future is meant to address disparities in academic achievement. But is it realistic to expect that this plan will work for students of color, including those from households with few resources, students learning English as a second language, or those navigating behavioral, emotional learning, or attention impediments? And how do things look from parents' point of view? Our presenters tonight will give us some insight, followed by an audience Q&A. But first, some housekeeping details. This webinar is presented by the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County. The meeting is being recorded and is being live streamed to Facebook. The recording will be made available at a later date on our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Those links will be in the chat box. The audience will be muted during the webinar, and the chat box has been disabled for attendees to minimize distractions. After our speakers make their presentations, we will have a Q&A. Questions will be visible as they are answered. We encourage you to ask questions, but we want to remind everyone to be respectful of our speakers and of each other. To submit a question, click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Type your question into the box and then hit send or return. We will answer as many questions as time allows, and our program is scheduled to end at 8:30. Now, I'm pleased to introduce tonight's speakers. Ike Leggett was the Montgomery County executive for 3 terms and served on the council before that. He currently chairs the Accountability and Implementation Board, established by the Maryland General Assembly. He will describe the elements of the blueprint for Maryland's future and how the Accountability and Implementation Board will monitor Montgomery County Public Schools' progress in accomplishing the objectives of the plan. Dr. MONIFA McKnight has worked for the Montgomery County Public Schools for over 20 years as a teacher, principal, and central office administrator. She is now the superintendent for the Montgomery County Public Schools. She will speak to the implementation of the blueprint for Maryland's future in Montgomery County. Stephanie ROSEN is the executive director of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, Montgomery County. She will address current experiences and anticipated outcomes for students with special needs. Finally, we have with us tonight Abba Gabrihiwa, who is the Parent Community Coordinator in the Montgomery County Public Schools Office of School Support and Wellbeing. She works with schools system-wide to support schools and families. She will share parents' perspectives on what it takes to help students stay on track or catch up in their academics. Now, it's my pleasure to invite Ike Leggett to begin tonight's program.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. First, let me do a little bit of housekeeping. The overall subject for us today is how do we close the achievement gap here in Montgomery County? When we use the term achievement gap, I think it's sometimes a disservice to some of our students, and it's unavoidable because this is the way people generally identify with the changes between various groups throughout our educational process. But what we're really talking about is access, opportunity, and resources. And this is essentially what the blueprint is all about. The blueprint came about as a result of the actions of the Maryland General Assembly from the current commission. And is there to provide, next, see a few slides that you would see, and has a very strong mandate. The AIB was established solely to focus on the implementation of the blueprint for Maryland's future and the vision and goals that the blueprint sets forth in the state's public education to make it really a world-class system. Now, the question is, some people assume that this was just an easy process. It's something that was just thrown together overnight without any thought, without any kind of impact or input from various constituent portions of our state. If you look here at our slide, you see the blueprint's history from 2016 all the way up to 2022. But the blueprint was not the first endeavor for us to look at this type of approach. Some may remember some years ago, we had the Thornton Commission that went on a similar path. But the difference here is that the General Assembly decided that they wanted to have greater accountability and to make certain that this plan was fully implemented. This plan was fully implemented. And it provided an extraordinary amount of resources and authority to the implementation board. That's why we were created. Now, when you think about it, there are some reasons as to why we are trying to get here and what we're trying to do. And why we have this blueprint all together. Let's look at our performance compared to others around the world. Maryland is essentially in the middle of the pack of the United States of America. Now, some may say that's not that bad, but keep in mind that the United States is in the middle of the pack of the world. It's essentially like the world is playing Major League Baseball, and we're in the middle of that baseball, but we're in the AAA league, Maryland, in the middle of the AAA league. That's not acceptable. We have a large number of students that need help and support. If you look at it from this standpoint, somewhere less than 40% of our kindergartens are not prepared, only 40% at best, are not prepared for kindergarten at entering school as they come in. Probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 1/3 of our students who graduate are college or career ready. We lose somewhere in the neighborhood of 50% of all of our teachers within the first 5 years of their working here in the state of Maryland. That's 50%. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 60% of our kids who enter college need remediation in reading and math. That's a challenge for us. And so the blueprint is designed to address that. And how are we going about addressing that? Well, we looked at 5 different areas in which to tackle this particular problem. The first one is early childhood education. And that is to address this challenge of the kids who are not prepared for learning at the earliest stages of this. The second is, of course, high quality teachers and more diverse teachers throughout the state of Maryland. And that's important for us because if you think about it, we cannot have an effective system unless we have teachers who are highly qualified and more diverse teachers teaching in our classroom. The third one is to have kids who are college and career ready. The college and career ready students are the backbone, at least the goal for us in this entire process. It is our goal and attempt here to ensure that all of our students by the end of the 10th grade are college and career ready. That's a huge, huge task. Now, we need more resources, which is the fourth pillar, for our students and their families to help them, because you simply cannot rely solely upon the teachers in the classroom to achieve this enormous task that we're looking at. So, and then finally, we need greater accountability that is to constantly look at with empirical data to make sure that our students are performing on the way that they should. Now, this plan is a 10-year plan, but we are not waiting for 10 years in order to assess and to make certain that our students are performing at the level that we want. And so what will happen, we will have periodic tests on an annual basis that will be able to look at to determine what kind of progress we're making along the ways. So let's go back through that again. First pillar is early childhood education. The second one is to have high quality teachers and more diverse teachers. The third pillar, college and career readiness. The fourth, more resources to students so they can be successful. And the fifth is accountability and governance. Now, what are the challenges we go through this? You know, it's not that easy just to simply look at these things and assume that they will happen. I would say that there are two. The first is what I call the transformation of this, a cultural transformation in the state of Maryland. This will not be easy. This will be very, very difficult work. Most people, when they first think about the blueprint, they're thinking, well, what they really mean is just small incremental changes from what we're already doing. That's not what this is about. This is a major transformation. We'll have to do an awful lot. We'll have to do an awful lot in a relatively short period of time, and we'll have to do it differently. This is a radical, bold transformation. When I say that, I want to underline bold transformation. This will not be easy. This will be very, very difficult in order to achieve. Now, the second challenge for us is, of course, what I mentioned a little bit earlier, having high quality teachers, more diverse teachers at a time when the number of teachers around the United States are actually going down. That's a real problem for us. Keep in mind that the blueprint legislation, at least the arguments for the blueprint, was developed prior to the pandemic. Subsequent to the pandemic, around the country, the entire country, we've seen a large number of teachers leaving the system. So Maryland now is requiring more teachers, more diverse teachers, better qualification for our teachers. And we are trying to do this at a time when the number of teachers are shrinking. That's a very difficult task. So we have to transform the system. We need within that system the number of teachers that I said before, because you can't achieve most of these objectives here without quality teachers. And that's the real challenge for us. But I'm very hopeful that we can achieve that. I'm very hopeful that we have local systems such as Montgomery County and our local leadership that I think will take the lead throughout the state of Maryland, because we're going to try to provide as best we can the access, the opportunity, and the resources, in my opinion, that will be there for all of our students. And once we achieve that and establish that baseline, I think that we will close any gap that currently exists. But the achievement gap really is about access, opportunity, and resources. And that's what the AIB is about. Now, what we're going to do is make certain that we know, that all of the local systems know what the needs are to be implemented from the blueprint, when these tasks are to be implemented, and who needs to implement them. And we're going to hold people accountable for what we do. If we do that, then our local system here in Montgomery County will be even more successful than it's been in the past. I'm very hopeful for that. Oh, and let me add one thing here for you. If you want to ensure that you look at we just released the comprehensive plan of how we're going to do this. It's a 200-page plan. You have the QR code, which I think is up at this point in time. If not, make sure you can see it on your screen. And you just simply take your a phone, take a picture of that, and you can get a copy of the 200+ page plan that we are implementing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leggett. Next, I'm inviting Dr. MONIFA McKnight to present.
Thank you so much, Judy. And good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight to engage in such an important conversation that Mr. Leggett has led off with in sharing the blueprint. So I must say it's great to be with you all to talk about the blueprint, because I call it as a moment of reconstruction in public education. And after COVID-19, we've seen so many changes and so many, quite frankly, opportunities that we can continue to build upon. And so the blueprint has come at the right time. And in Montgomery County, we actually see the blueprint as an opportunity, not just a mandate. You know, it has a set of requirements that, quite frankly, I believe in Montgomery County Public Schools, we must surpass, and do so in not merely complying, but looking at the blueprint as our floor and not the ceiling. And I say that because as our school system, being the superintendent, I've grown up in the school system and very proud of it. We've been able to make great gains for our students over the years. And so when we look at the blueprint and a number of the initiatives that have come along in it, I think it will allow us to go even further than we ever have before as a public education institution. So I will say Mr. Leggett has built a really, really good foundation of understanding of the blueprint and the vision around why it was established and what school systems across the state are expected to do. And I'll say that the blueprint does have major implications for how we envision and think about and design our schools, not just in the state, but in my interest and our interest here in Montgomery County. I also want to note that Mr. Leggett mentioned this earlier, but as we continue to think about the opportunity gaps that we have to close in MCPS, we constantly talk about the fact that the strength is in our diversity in the school system. And so we strive to become an anti-racist school system. And when our school system is providing a high quality teaching and learning experience to all of the students that it serves, then that means we have to create the opportunity for that to happen. And that's how we get away from that thinking of the achievement gap exists because of, some may perceive short-sighted as issues that the students have, but it's actually about the opportunity we afford to them. I also want to say, we are very lucky here in Montgomery County. And we're lucky because as this blueprint is rolling out in districts across the state, we actually have our very own Leggett chairing the Accountability and Implementation Board. And he knows, he's been around public education and here in Montgomery County for years as the county executive. And then to be a part of a broader perspective of how this whole plan will be implemented, taking into consideration all of the different needs that exist within the state, whether it may be small districts, large districts, knowing that the blueprint, while it has its expectations laid out, the way that looks will be designed based on the local school system that is implementing it. So while the blueprint does bring consistency to the areas and the districts across the state, it really does focus on some high key leverage areas that, again, we've gotten a head start on in Montgomery County for years, but we will be able to extend on. And the first being early childhood access and expansion. The second area is high quality teachers and leaders. Third is college and career pathways. And then fourth, targeted resources to ensure that all of our students are being successful. So as I talk about these different areas tonight, one of the things that I wanted to make sure I do is make a connection between my recently released recommended fiscal year 2024 operating budget and the blueprint. It's going to be really important for us not just to conceptualize what are the things that we're going to have to do in the blueprint, but how are we going to do it? And quite frankly, how many of the requirements within the blueprint I see as stepping stones to making sure that our students are college and career and community ready, starting all the way from pre-K to graduation from high school and beyond. So I felt like that was the best way to frame it. I did see a question in the chat that asked about how the MCPS blueprint implementation plan that's due in March is going to crosswalk with the Board of Education's approved strategic plan. Well, you'll naturally see those connections too, but I will point out a few connections as I go through and talk about the initiatives within the blueprint and how they are obvious in my recommended budget. So I recommended back in December to the Board of Education a $3.15 billion operating budget. And that does represent an 8% increase more than our current operating budget, but it does invest specifically and intentionally in all the areas that I just mentioned to you that are laid out in the blueprint. And as you learn more about the blueprint, I think it's really important for everyone who's a part of this meeting tonight to become ambassadors and champions for the blueprint. I think it's leading work that's being done in the state. And I think it's important for the community to become ambassadors and champions for that blueprint, because you then become champions for the operating budget as well, because you'll quickly see that unless we invest differently in these areas, then we won't be able to make progress in the way that I know we can in our school system, which is why we've got to do that. So I'll start with pillar 1, which is around early childhood access. And the blueprint takes a tiered approach to broadening kindergarten access through the early childhood pathway. This is an area that definitely focuses on the strategic plan area number 1 from the Board of Education, and that's on academic excellence, because we truly believe that the earlier children are able to be exposed to education, then the more prepared they are when they come into kindergarten. And in future years, more 3- and 4-year-old students are going to be eligible for free and reduced pre-kindergarten based on income eligibility. So in my recommended budget, I propose continuing to expand our local pre-kindergarten programs to serve more students. And again, that's really important, because if we want to achieve academic excellence in our school system, we can't wait until the students come to us and say, how do we catch up? We actually catch them up on the front end before they come into the school system, so that they come in ready and then stay astute to all of their learning needs throughout their academic career, so that they can continue to be successful. The second pillar, focused around high quality teachers and leaders, requires that we in many ways bring our educators and bring all of our educators the dignity and respect that they deserve. And we do so by providing them with fair salaries and pathways to professional growth. So again, that's nothing new to us in Montgomery County Public Schools. We have a history of strong compensation, but we have fallen behind other districts in that competitiveness. As Mr. Leggett was sharing some of the statistics around being able to not just recruit teachers, but we have to be able to retain them. And think about it, when you invest in all that's required to hire a new teacher, that's an investment that we want to keep. It's an investment that actually pays forward in the community, every school community, because when that teacher stays into that school, we invest in the professional development that they're learning. If they leave us and go somewhere else, then that means we've lost not just what we've paid for that teacher, but all of the investment that we've had in them to be a great teacher for our students. And every time that happens, then you have turnover, and a community has to get to know a new person. So we need to keep our teachers in our classrooms, and we need to do so within Montgomery County Public Schools. We currently rank 5th in the state in starting salary for teachers. And then our highest paid teachers only rise to the 4th highest paid in the state. And so us being the largest school system, of course, we are very, very much focused on how we have to make sure we are keeping a competitive compensation package in place for our teachers, because we will have to hire more than any other district within the state, and we take that into consideration. Now, the blueprint requires that by 2026, that the minimum teacher salary in the state of Maryland is $60,000. Now, when you think about that, as you know, when we think about the cost of living and all of those things, we definitely do have a lot of work to do around how we pay educators. We know without educators, we wouldn't be able to have any other professions existing within society. Everyone has to be trained, everyone has to be taught, and get that education to be able to continue to be good community leaders, members, and work in many different professions. But we know that we must be competitive in one of the highest, as we live in one of the highest costs of living areas within the state, which is in Montgomery County. We have to be able to pull ahead of other districts. We've learned over time, not just that it's the salary that meets educators' needs and encourages them to stay within the profession, but they also want good work-life balance. And a part of that is them being able to live in Montgomery County. And so with that said, we have to, take into consideration, what does it cost to live in Montgomery County? And so how does our pay address that, particularly when, again, we are one of the most one of the areas with one of the highest cost of living within the state. So we have to take that into consideration. So with all of that said, coming back to the strategic plan, academic excellence, we have to invest in our teachers to be able to get good output from our students. So my budget does include an increase of more than $100 million dollars that we are planning to devote to staff salaries to address that very need. So the third pillar that I wanted to address tonight was college and career readiness. And the blueprint essentially envisions two parts to high school. Under the blueprint, the first half of high school, grades 9 and 10, those grades are going to be devoted to helping students achieve the college and career readiness threshold. Therefore, students are deemed to be college or career ready or not based on their performance on certain assessments by the end of 10th grade. Now, that becomes very important because previously in our former assessments, we have really looked at whether students were prepared in the 11th grade or by the end of the 11th grade. I'm really excited about this because what this requires us to do is to back up how we are looking at students and their readiness for graduation and college earlier in their high school career. And to me, that means we're not gambling. If we know how students are doing at the end of their 10th grade year, then that still gives us 2 more years if a student is in need of support to meet that requirement of reaching their graduation requirements. We can really drill in on the support that we're providing them and be much more intentional because we have more time. So that's one of the things that differ significantly from the former college and career standard under which we were previously operating. Students could meet one of a number of measures by the end of 11th grade. So I think us backing that up to 10th grade is going to be a key lever in increasing our graduation rates. And I say specifically in these subgroups that we're looking at that we want to continue to raise in terms of student graduation rate, as well as ensuring that our students are not just graduating, but more of them are graduating, being college and career ready. So after 10th grade, students who are college and career ready are expected to then participate in one of 3 post-college and career readiness paths. And so they can do that in several ways. First, a package of college preparation courses they can have access to through the advanced placement. That's one avenue, the International Baccalaureate, our IB program, or Cambridge courses. So that's one path. A second is they can engage in a dual enrollment pathway that leads to an associate's degree by the end of high school. And then the third path is a career and technical preparation pathway that leads to an industry certification by the end of high school. So again, as I talk about that, that just gets me so excited because that says, again, a moment ago, I spoke about us now backing up that readiness and taking a look at a student's look at a student's profile in their second year of high school to make sure that we are guiding and supporting them in the proper ways to be college and career ready. But then this is also about getting them prepared when they graduate. They have so many options. They're graduating with so much more than just a high school diploma. So I tell you, when I look at things like this in the blueprint, it's exciting. It's just amazing. I in some ways, I wish, I had examples like this as a high school student growing up, because you're so much more prepared in so many different ways for what you want to do when you leave high school, so that you're not starting out, with just like a blank path of what am I going to do? And so that means that we're paying attention to those things when students are in high school. So now I'll go back to the budget. And again, focusing on the board's priority of academic excellence. Our budget does include a significant funding in the request, and that is to encourage our students to pursue those pathways. And that means that encouraging them to pursue those pathways, we have to look at any barriers that may exist for them or may deter them or make them question whether those pathways are for them. And that does include them paying for the fees in our advanced placement and IB and dual enrollment programs. So in the budget, I have provision for us to be able to take care of those fees so that we're eliminating any barriers that may exist for students. And when we look at the trajectory of students who go into these programs, I continue to say we have to look at who it is and who is it that we are trying to make an impact on. And so as we look at our data in Montgomery County Public Schools, and we know that there are groups of students who we want to increase the number of their participation in AP and IB and dual enrollment programs, then we have to say then if that's what we want, then we have to remove a barrier. And I think that that accelerator in our budget is one that definitely speaks to us bringing equity to that process. Finally, when we take a look at pillar 4, and that one's focused on more resources to ensure that all of our students are successful. MCPS long has differentiated resources according to student and according to school need, so that the schools with the higher poverty have smaller class size and even more resources. So I have in my budget deepen our commitment to equity by doubling the number of innovative calendar schools, our schools with 30 additional days of learning. There's so much research out there that says, in order for our students to be able to recover from the pandemic and for them to be able to have consistency in their learning, particularly those who are impacted, who have not been exposed to early learning programs and things like that, it is time that is going to help them achieve and make progress in many ways in their learning. And so that commitment within the operating budget to be able to expand our innovative calendar schools, I think is another area to get us there. We also have 26 community schools that provide health, mental health, academic and extracurricular support services needed to help those students flourish. So we recently hosted a ribbon cutting ceremony at one of our community schools. And many of you may have seen that it was actually aired on the news, in which we showed a pantry that was in one of our community schools. But it's just one of the many services that we're providing in those schools to make sure we're providing the resources to the students and the communities in the way that they need it, recognizing that the same resources needed for school A may not be the same resource that's needed for school B. And we need and should differentiate based on the need. So I'll say in summary, MCPS, we are excited to implement the blueprint, and we're ready to lead the effort. I believe these are the right areas of focus to serve our students, but we will bring it alive right here in Montgomery County Public Schools. We're going to bring it alive through the local investment that our community supports. And I do look forward to us continuing to engage with our community to think about ways that you can continue to be ambassadors and understand the evolution of what we are now implementing in our public school system in Montgomery County Public Schools, and to be a part of it, to most importantly, benefit as a parent or a community member here in Montgomery County. So thank you so much for allowing me an opportunity to share how we are working on these areas of the blueprint and excited about its implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McKnight. Now I'm inviting Stephanie Rosen to present.
Hi, thank you for having me. So I'm a little bit different than the last two presenters. I am not an expert on the MCPS blueprint. So, but what I do is I work in the mental health space. And as we know, over the past several years, mental health has been challenging for everybody, adults and especially students, and especially our youth. So NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I run the Montgomery County affiliate, and we provide resources and peer support and do education surrounding mental health. So as I mentioned, and as you all are aware, this couldn't have come at a better time, the emphasis on closing the achievement gap, because not only, the other students that clearly are suffering are students who live with a mental illness. 1 in 6 since 2020 experience a major depressive episode. This is throughout the United States. This is not in Maryland or Montgomery County, of course. There were an increase in serious suicidal thoughts, an increase in emergency department visits, and all of this was exacerbated from isolation, from doing school from home, from stress within the families. We, had families all of a sudden. I know that we've moved on thankfully, but I actually do have to. How this impacted our youth was that 1 in 5 young people reported that the pandemic did have a significant impact on their health. Many youth turn to alcohol or drugs to cope. And there was an increase of use of drugs among those who are adolescents and young adults. There's not, so clearly this doesn't bode well for students when it comes to achievement. This is, coping mechanisms that we want to provide support for students and for families when they're turning to drugs or alcohol and not mental health treatment or support. Again, it's very prevalent and more prevalent since the pandemic. One of the really sad statistics about mental health is that the average delay between symptom onset and treatment is 11 years. So there are many youth who are going undiagnosed, untreated, and we're not connecting them with the supports that they need at the right time. Early intervention is a major focus of NAMI and a major driver for what we want to see in a better mental health care system in our county. Mental illness doesn't just affect that one person, that one individual. It very much has what we call a ripple effect. It can affect that individual with later chronic diseases like diabetes or cancer. It can also affect and lead to substance use disorder. It affects the family, the entire family. Caregivers and parents of children living with mental illness spend parents are caregivers for children anyway, but it's especially difficult if your child has any challenges. Which then expands to the community and to our world. There's a connection between incarceration and mental illness that we absolutely want to avoid. It is a treatable illness and not a crime. Specifically in Maryland, more than half of people who live with a mental health condition do not receive any treatment, and that number is about the same for youth. And then specifically for Maryland, individuals are 10 times more likely to be forced out of network. And that's one of the biggest things that we hear is that, you have insurance and all youth are covered, but finding a provider who accepts insurance. And I know that in MCPS that you all are working really hard to fill positions to provide mental health care and support for students in schools because in-network providers are very difficult to come by. So specifically what NAMI is, again, is we're a grassroots mental health organization. We bring together communities of peers to provide support, education, and advocacy. And those communities are not just individuals living with mental illness, but they're caregivers and allies. Special thing about our programs is that they're peer-led and that they're free. So these are not programs led by physicians, clinicians, or therapists. It is led by parents teaching other parents how to, get help, how to get treatment, how to be a better parent, how to take care of yourself through the process as well. So one of the programs that we offer, and that I want to make sure that people are aware as a resource outside of MCPS, is our support groups. We have support groups for parents of children living with mental health conditions. And this is a really great place to find resources within and outside of MCPS. Our support groups are extremely, people love them. People, and people do continue to attend them over and over again. I do want to emphasize that it is hard to find a community where all the other parents there understand what you're going through. And that community is extremely important. There are also classes that we offer. There's specifically one class for parents of children living with mental health conditions. If you go to the next slide, it's called NAMI Basics. It's a 6-session class, and this, like all of our other programs, are free. It teaches you everything that you need to know to be a parent of a child living with a mental health condition. It's an extremely powerful program with a lot of content and information that was created at our national organization. And so I do want to invite you all to reach out to NAMI at any time if you need help or support. We're not the only organization providing help and support to children and parents of individuals living with mental health conditions. There are some really fantastic groups doing a lot of work because this is such a big issue to tackle. This is an effort that we all need to be a part of, an effort in identifying and connecting people with help, and then supporting them in getting that help, and lowering barriers to seek treatment. And you know, this all comes back to, you know, MCPS is such an enormous part of our children's lives, and mental health can absolutely affect how they're relating to other students, relating to their teachers, and able to be set up for success. You know, the blueprint is for making sure that all of our students achieve, including those students who live with mental health conditions and need extra support throughout their schooling. So thank you. Again, a little different, not an well, there's a really fantastic guide on navigating a mental health crisis. But that can also be reached if you call our helpline, if you join a support group, if you take a class. There's a lot of different options, a lot of different supports.
Thank you so much. Now, finally, I'm inviting Abba Gabrihiwat to present.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. Everyone that said something today is in our daily life and what we do as parent community coordinators. Today, I'll be speaking from the ground level, where everything that Mr. Leggett mentioned, Dr. McKnight mentioned, and then what Ms. Stephanie Rosen mentioned is what the parent community coordinator gets involved with on a daily basis. With all the schools that we have from pre-K to 12th grade, and then as we usher students into the college environment, we're dealing with the everyday life that must be dealt with by families. By that, I mean, it could be as simple as, what do I need to come into the school? Enrollment. It could be supplies. Where is it posted? Where do I find it? To some of the most difficult challenges that come after a health challenge or a family loss challenge. In particular, in the most recent years, our role as parent community coordinators has expanded to supporting families to help them stand up and advocate for their children physically and emotionally, in the same manner that the school staff, the counselors, is trying to help the students. Our role is to facilitate communication, to facilitate support that MCPS provides. All of it at the end of the day is to make sure each child succeeds to the best of the possible opportunities offered. So in a nutshell, our title is Parent Community Coordinators. We're called Parent Outreach Staff. We come under the umbrella of family engagement, which is known to everyone and also supported by research. Family engagement specifically and definitely affects children's ability to achieve, given all the same opportunities. Without family engagement, it cannot happen. We all know it, but we're also fortunate in MCPS that we do have a staff dedicated to do that. And the origin of this program, even though it preceded the time when our particular unit was formed, which was I came in 2006 at a time when the Montgomery County leadership on the county level, as well as the school level, MCPS, were being asked by the community to address the need for academic support and socio-emotional support for the underserved communities. And with that, a unit that started looking into the different the demographics as well as the needs, as diversity increased and also the need increased. So our unit, we support not only the families, but the school, meaning if I help a family and a teacher, the student will benefit. How is that done? We say from pre-K to 12th grade, at the entry level, we collaborate with the different departments also. So it will mean the admissions and enrollment office. We may help just simply in helping the families understand. As diversity, what does that really mean on the ground level? We have families who come from different states, who have different school districts, and the way if they enter the school might be different. They might be English speakers, they just don't know our system. And then on the other side, we have the added challenge of families who are completely not aware of the process. So we have to step in and bridge the gap from the entry. Once they come in, so where do we start? Being with for pre-K students, because there are qualification requirements. It's not just about enrolling just because you live in Montgomery College. We help explain those processes. And then we go to kindergarten. We are present during the orientation and during the attendance challenges, because for a lot of families, it could be just not knowing that in this environment, starting from pre-K, they're college bound, they're academics, they're not just playing. So attendance is severely needed. So we may come in to help families understand when the teacher is tagging you for attendance, the teacher doesn't have the opportunity to ignore just because they like or don't like, you know, a child. This is specifically Maryland State monitored attendance is very critical. Then when it gets severely not attended to, we're the people who are going to talk to the parent and say, if you don't follow these rules, it's not going to be good for the child, but also it's not going to be good for you. So at every given juncture, we're facilitating understanding, meaning once the family understands why it's not good for the child to come in 15 minutes late every other day, then we also look at the reason why. It could be mom and dad are working 2 or 3 jobs each, and then they're trying to connect their schedule, and then somebody forgot that they needed to push that child to get going, not forgot, but we know how that goes, to get on the bus. Or it could be that they are walkers or riders, those criteria that are necessary to be put in place by transportation. So now we're explaining transportation. So attendance, transportation, and then there's the academics portion, homework. So we all know, for anyone who has raised a child, if you're not making sure that the alarm is on, you are the alarm. You're the one who's going in that room, nagging that child to get on that bus. So what I'm here to share with you is there is help in place. We know the academic access and opportunity is there, but what are the obstacles? And once we get a phone call or an email or request via a standard form, I'm one of those people. There are 8 of us who serve the entire school system. And then we also have people who are assigned 2 or 3 schools each. So we are present on a weekly basis or on a referral basis. How do we work with the academics? A teacher may try to reach out to a parent, send an email and say, your child is not meeting the daily academic standard. Or it might mean after a certain point, we're going to have what they call an EMT, which is educational management team saying there is a concern. So it's similar to, everything that goes on, there's a checkpoint. The first person to check is the teacher. The first person to contact the teacher, the parent, is the teacher, because they have to have a relationship with them. Now, when the teacher needs help, it could be based on language. It could be just simply system differences. And the team that is in our office, we're multilingual, multicultural, and also we have background in our own education. I, for example, finished high school here. I have 2 degrees here, but when I had to raise my kid, I still had to be taught how to do it. It's not about what we knew yesterday. System changes, academics rigor changes. What is not changing is a child needs to come to school physically and be present emotionally and mentally. And what do we do with the part which is not mechanical? When a student is not doing well, a school counselor has observed and tried to help, and then they need to get the parent to join them so they can replicate what the counselor is trying to do at school at home. So at this point, we might be needed to let the parent know this counselor is not just pounding on your child. The counselor is trying to help. It might mean they don't have the resources. They may all be living in one room, or they could be living in a palace. And so who is tending to this child's home part in order to, once again, make sure there is no achievement gap or access gap? So we connect families to resources if there is a resource need. The resources, for example, it could be housing. We don't have housing at MCPS, but we connect with staff with Department of Health and Human Services. That's their specialty. So we specialize in what we do, which is bridge the communication gap to close the opportunity gap. And then we go to the socio-emotional part. If it needs to go outside the school system, we now have to work with the parent to be receptive to the help. We have to. So Stephanie's not a stranger to me. In fact, I might be calling you right after this meeting, because sometimes we have families whose needs cannot wait. If I may take you to not so positive days, this week, I'm dealing with 3 families, one of them who lost a father, one who the father had a stroke, the other one has been paralyzed. All of these things outside COVID, we all are talking about COVID, cancer, and everything else is happening to the families. When we talk about demographics, families, we have, about 160,000 plus students, 209 schools. That is the community. That's Montgomery County. That means if we were to tie a string, everybody in that school is tied to somebody outside that school, at work, at the hospital, at church, everywhere else. So it's us, about us. So when we go to work, it's not the kind of work you could do just on paper. You have to be invested. And the more we connect with the families and build a relationship, the more we can empower them. We're not just telling them you're doing this, that differently or wrong. We're just saying, what do you know? What can you do? What is it that we can help you with? During COVID, we ourselves were stretched. All of a sudden, we are part of the tech support. We have a wonderful tech division, but there's not a way that they could do everything, because we had families, we had to show exactly where the Chromebook is plugged in and where you turn it on, what email you use. There's so many daily things that we take for granted that families need before they could show up at the table. And just as important, if not as more important, is our support for families who may have to use services out inside the school or outside the school. One such area is special needs. So we may go to the EMT meeting, which is Educational Management Team meeting. At that meeting, they may decide the child needs some intervention. What is intervention? Families are concerned. The minute you talk about meeting, they think, and you're saying special needs, you're talking about some learning disability, they're scared you're sending their child to some orphanage-like place. So now we have to bring it back to safety and say, no, we may have a different program, a different school, but we're not sending them anywhere. First is going to be in their home school. So any parent that has anxiety, they don't always tell it to everybody at the table. They tell it to us at the end of the meeting on our way out the door. And now we have to bring it back to the staff. So we're twisting and turning. It could be from a teacher, an administrator. It could also be a bad act from a student that led to expulsion hearing. So we have to explain that. So we have to churn so many things. And how do we stay sane? Basically, we lean on each other and we lean on every staff in the building that's happy to see us because they know we're here to solve something. And I must publicly thank the county council, starting during the leadership of Mr. Leggett, because if they did not listen to MCPS and listen to the community and fund these support programs, I don't know what would happen to families or how much stress can teachers take without support. So it's all about everybody rolling up their sleeves and saying, what do we have going on today? And we have plenty of surprises, but we're not surprised because we know everything that's happening at MCPS is happening in the universe. There's nothing that we are causing to be something that's happening to MCPS parents. Families are dealing with the same economic challenges, health challenges, every challenge that is out there, we have it. What is different is that the school district recognizes the need, the county council recognizes the need. We're very fortunate. We had Mr. Leggett. He's still doing something in relation to that. And I once heard him say at the League of Women Voters meeting, he asked the crowd to clap and cheer for the parents who are not in attendance that day. Everybody looked and he said, it's probably because they're working 2-3 jobs. They couldn't attend that event. And it takes leadership and school staff and all the other agencies that we look to for them to provide housing support, utility support, social services support, and organizations like NAMI and Caring Matters, where we have to, in some places, we have students who have what we call school refusal. They're just agonizing. They don't want to come to school because either they're suffering from depression or just stressed out from too much pressure in school, or all kinds of stuff that's going on in social media. We're not the experts, but we know who to tag. And so Ms. Rosen knows us. We're always calling on to them for them to help. So I think what we have to do is continue to push, continue to do, and continue to believe in everybody's ability to do their part, other than just constantly updating our information and knowing good and well many of our families cannot keep up with the many challenges, and we have to fill in the gap. If we fill in the gap, the learning and the social emotional support in place, we can't shortchange the children. It's all about the children. That's it. at the end of the day, it's all about the children and their future. And thank you. I am grateful that you gave us this opportunity. For anyone that wants to know how to find this kind of support, if you just go to Montgomery County Public School website and just Google parent community coordinators or parent outreach, you'll find us there. They even have our picture so we can't hide. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, everyone. Now we're ready for our question and answer period. And for that, I'm turning it over to Cynthia Bodywill.
Thank you, Judy. As a reminder to our audience participants, we encourage you to ask questions by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Type your question into the box, then hit send or return. Remember that questions will be visible as they are answered. We will answer as many questions as time allows. We ask that all attendees be respectful of our presenters and of each other. And just as a reminder, this program is scheduled to end at 8:30. So let me start with the first question. I think, Ike, this is probably in your bailiwick. Are you, there you are, okay. So the question reads, given the number of research efforts to close the achievement gap over many years that included implementation and monitoring, how will monitoring and accountability be implemented to ensure effectiveness of the blueprint?
Well, thank you for your question. We are still in the process of providing the matrix for how we will judge, how we would examine, have the empirical data that's necessary to do so. The reason for that is that we want to make certain that everyone starts at a fair place in terms of the foundation, and that we can measure progress accordingly. So the next couple of months, there's a task force that will provide a report to the board, for which we will then approve or disapprove, that would outline those measures for us. We do not want to use that in terms of the board itself doing it. We want to make sure that the local boards, the superintendent of the State Board of Education, all are involved in this, because this is a very, very serious endeavor. If we don't get that right, then we will have either someplace an unfair process, or in some place process that is not rigorous enough. And so we're taking our time over the next couple of months. We'll have those metrics out, and everyone could participate in that and see how we are providing the information for the public to see how we'll do that. But I'm not going to answer that right now. I'm going to let the task force come up with the measures for how we'll do that.
Thank you. I think this would either go to Dr. McKnight or to you, Ike. Which schools are selected for the Innovative School Year program? Will the 3 to 5 schools paired with NICS, in parentheses, Crest Haven, be added?
Yes, I'll take that question. In the presentation earlier, I spoke about my request, including an opportunity to expand the innovative calendar schools. So we have designated funding in the proposal to expand to additional schools. Those schools have not yet been identified. The reason we haven't identified those schools is we have a host of schools that we could choose from. However, we wanted to be able to have a team look at information, give schools an opportunity to elect into being an innovative calendar school, because we want feedback and investment from the staff, quite frankly, in those schools to want to do that. And so we wanted to socialize that first and engage our school community in the selection process, which is why we decided not to just identify them from top down. So stay tuned.
Okay, thank you. I think this next question deals with making sure that children are in a place where they can accept access, opportunity, and resources. So it reads, Is there a system in place to identify those students dealing with food insecurity? If so, what plans are being made to address it? If not, will efforts be made to do so?
I can speak from an MCPS perspective. So yes, we actually do have a number of designations that we have identified for our students who need additional supports. That does signify there could possibly be a food insecurity situation. And so in using those designations, we reach out to those students and those families just to ensure that they have what they need. And then overall in the county, we've done so many initiatives to make sure that food insecurity is not a barrier for our students, knowing that they, one, have to be fed, and being prepared to learn means you're not hungry. So we have programs like Dine with Dignity, and programs like that take care of any stigma that is attached to a student not having food. And most importantly, since we started this actually during the pandemic, when we started providing food to all of our students, we've kept that. And so if a student does not have money, they can still go into our cafeterias and get any meal that they desire to have, so that they are not embarrassed or in any way feeling like that's an extra step that they have to take.
In addition to that, if you look at the fourth pillar in the blueprint, it clearly indicates a very strong need in additional funding in the current and future budgets that would help families in need and help students so that they are prepared and reduce some of the challenges that they face as it relates to not only food, but other barriers as well.
Thank you both.
I just want to add, oh, I'm sorry.
Please go
I
ahead,
just-
Alba.
I just wanted to add, in addition to the formal ways that we try to help with the food insecurity, is sometimes we may get a phone call about attendance, but then we end up finding out from talking to the parents, there has been some financial insecurity going on. So that's where we then refer them to county agencies. Sometimes it might be something that they're embarrassed to start, or they don't know where to start. So by us working with the families, and in fact, sometimes schools immediately contact us if they sense that if a child is continuously eating the same thing or not eating well. So we are one of those contact points when it comes to food insecurity as well.
Thank you. So this may dovetail a little bit on that same question, and I'll start with you with this one. The question is, how effective are teachers in high need schools at reaching out to parents? Do they do that directly?
It's believed that because the families know who their child's teacher is most of the time, first line of contact is the teachers. Usually parents like to hear from them first, and then they will reach out to us. We also have another partner, which is the PPW, People Personnel Workers. So between the two of us, we'll then try to have a sit down and talk with the family, because sometimes they may not be comfortable telling the teacher what's happening at home. So that's where the teacher may confidentially just share with us, I had a chat, I'm not sure, but could you check? Or we may just go in for something totally unrelated and find out this is the case. So we keep it kind of at the forefront when we see some challenges that it could very well be related to families struggling with food insecurity and other insecurities. So the county has so many agencies, and it's very difficult for people to just get online and do this stuff. So we connect them with people that we have relationship with within the Montgomery County agency. So starting with 311, if we don't know the answer, we call 311. If not, we also partner with many agencies that provide food directly, like MONIFA, Nourish Now, and others, or it could be financial assistance that comes from Department of Health and Human Services.
Okay. And the second part of that question, I think, Dr. McKnight, you may be able to address this. Should these teachers be compensated more for this extra effort and time requirement?
Yes, I will Yes, I will certainly take the second part of that. So we have actually been, for the last 3 years in MCPS, really been working with our associations to look at ways in which we differentiate different teachers' needs. Teachers who are working in a high impact school, I think, are a perfect example. One, it is very critical for them, as it is any teacher, to make a connection to that student's family. Our students come to school and we serve them every day, but their families are an extension of them. And so their education becomes one that just becomes that much more of quality when we have a family that has a connection with that teacher or with the school, so that if things are of need for that student, or if the family is impacted in some way that is impeding the student with whether it's getting to school on time or being successful in their classes, then if that relationship is there, then the school's going to know about it and be able to act swiftly to address the needs. And so when you think about that, let's just say in our high need schools, what we know is oftentimes there's just much more impact, given that, those families are in some cases maybe working more than 2 jobs or experiencing things that they need support with. So when we think about and I'll give an example, our community school models, in which I just shared earlier in my comments, we were showcasing that in one of our community schools, we opened up our first community pantry in the school. Yes, that is a perfect example of how the staff in that school is going above and beyond in so many different ways to meet the needs of a community. So when it comes down to compensation, that's why we work with our associations to say, okay, let's look at the work that is being done. And how is it the same, or how is it different? And how do we take that into consideration so that we can differentiate in ways that are appropriate when that needs to happen? But we do that in a process in which we collaborate and take the employees' interest and workload into consideration.
Let me also add that in the blueprint, while we are talking about teachers, and it was mentioned earlier that in a couple of years, the minimum salary statewide, now I emphasize statewide, will be $60,000 for teachers. In addition to that, they will get $10,000 as National Board Certified Teacher, and $7,000 on top of that if they are actually teaching in one of the schools that will have most of the impact that was mentioned earlier, so that we are ensuring that we have teachers in those schools. We have, that means that 60, 10, and $77,000 potentially to a teacher teaching in one of the schools where we have those challenged students and other community impacts that may be needed extra help and support.
Mm-hmm. I want to thank you too, Mr. Leggett, for raising that, because actually that's a perfect example in terms of how in some places we really do benefit from legislation addressing some of those needs, so that the local doesn't have to take all of that on, but we're actually getting the financial support from the state to do those things. So that's a perfect example of the blueprint helping us move into a space in which we've tried to work through in some very traditional ways in the system. But now, essentially we are rewarding that.
Thank you both. And both of you may want to weigh in on this next question. The blueprint assumes children are enrolled pre-K through graduation to achieve goals. Yet in MCPS, we continually enroll new students and students relocate. How can these children sufficiently achieve the goals as outlined, particularly high school students who are in this situation?
I'm not sure I understood the last part of the question. Would you repeat that again?
I think how can these students sufficiently achieve the goals as outlined, particularly if they're coming in or coming in at the high school level or shortly before that?
Yeah, I understand. Well, obviously, we would prefer to have students in our system K through 12 and continuously throughout the entire school year. But as you know, there are interruptions, there are transfers and everything else. At the local level, I assume that they would have to come up with some additional support for students who have not been in the system for the entire period of time and provide some additional help and support for them. We encourage that, and we think that's probably the best way in order to do it. But that assumes that a student comes in who's not sufficiently ready or prepared. But assuming that they're not, the blueprint still requires that at the end of the 10th grade, we want that student either career or college ready. And if there's additional support that is needed, then we would have to help them at that level, last 2 years in order to get them up to speed. So that would create a challenge, and we will work through to try to get to that point, but it will be a challenge for us.
And I will add on that's why it's important when you look at education, you continue to have these bookends, right? So you think about pre-K, and that's helping them to come into the school system, being kindergarten readiness. But remember earlier I spoke about the fact that the blueprint is now requiring us to really look at students and assess their college and career readiness at the end of 10th grade. So even for those latecomers who do come in, and I think about many students through our international enrollment, who oftentimes are students who are coming in at the secondary level. Well, if we're assessing them early on in their high school career, before they get to the end of their high school career, which I'm going to say is more towards the end of the 11th grade, then we're able to put supports in place to be able to support them better. And of course, as Abe said it earlier, we have our PCCs and our PPWs, so many positions that are designated to help support those families of students who come into our school system late, to be able to acclimate them to the services that are provided and make sure they get the things that they need to be successful and reach those benchmarks.
Let me add something else that I may have overstated and say it correctly. We want to make sure they are ready by the end of the 10th grade, but we will assess those students annually so that we will know long before that what the challenges may be and help them, providing that help and support all the way through that process. So part of the plan is that we hopefully will have information regarding our performance annually so we can make some adjustments as we go forward.
Okay. Thank you both. The next question. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, as we all know, there are 22 credits that are required to graduate from high school. Within that, we also have things which is very critical, the student service hours that we do. For all of these things, when a student comes in, their transcript is evaluated. If they're coming in, let's say 9th grade, 10th grade at high school, or 7th grade, whatever level they're coming in, the admissions office evaluates and knows where they're at. So there is a roadmap to start with. And if there is intervention needed or language support needed for what we formerly called the ESOL students, English for speakers of other languages, now it is emergent language development, ELD. So basically, whatever I'm sorry, my memory is going back and forth. So at the end of the day, at the entry level, it is assessed and the transcript goes to the school. If they come in from another school within the United States, they go straight to the school. If they come in from another country, they go to the international admissions office that uses the international standard to have them to enter the Montgomery County Public School System. So that's where partnering with everybody that's going to have anything to do with that student graduating from MCPS is very critical. The parents need to understand so they don't say, you came in at 10th grade, you should finish quick, because the 22 credits may not match what students bringing in from another country or school district. So all of it is about communication and about having a roadmap from the minute they come in until they finish 12th grade. And then for anyone that is not going to probably complete with the diploma, there are several other roadmaps, meaning if they're going to go through the GED program, we have Montgomery College we partner with. And then if they're going to go to CREA for the other track. So what it means is, as long as there's clear communication and ongoing communication, the student will find a track to go forward be it to college or be it to some kind of other career that they may choose. So,
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is another question about the blueprint. How does the blueprint expand pre-K? Will it be universal or directed to low-income students? If you are increasing the number of pre-K classes, where will you house those classes?
Well, the latter part of the question is a difficult one for us because to demand and have in our plan that 3 and 4 year olds will be able to go to pre-K, especially if they're low income students, and on a sliding scale, the remainder will get some benefit from it. The anticipation is that virtually all students will be part of our pre-K, be enrolled in pre-K throughout the entire state. The challenge with that is what you just described in terms of the space. One of the things that we're looking at now is to partner with other spaces throughout many places around the state, where the state can provide additional resources in other community investments of capital in places like recreational centers and underused spaces around. Currently, the state only provide capital money into state space as opposed to other non-state space. So there will be some additional space add on in some places. There may be add-ons in other buildings and support therein so that we can get to that point. But the capital expansion in non-quote public school space may be a challenge. And even in some places in public schools, because there very well may, depending on the jurisdiction, fairly large numbers of students enrolling. And right now, the amount of space is not available under the current arrangements that which we are now seeking to have changed.
Okay.
I agree. And I'll also say that, while the pre-K expansion is more directed, there are more students of higher income becoming more eligible each year. It's like a sliding scale. We start with those who have the lowest income and then continue to create. That's why we need to create more seats, right? And we need more space to create more seats because we want all of our students to be able to have access to it, but we have to start with those who are in the most need.
Okay. So I think
Let me give an example. Could I give an example?
Absolutely.
What I'm talking about? We expanded when I was county executive and rebuilt a number of recreational centers, community centers in the county. In some places during the day, much of that space is not utilized until early in the morning, sometimes late in the evening. During those hours, it could be utilized, in my opinion, parts of it for space for pre-K students.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So this may be our last question here. I'll just read it verbatim. I appreciate the option that high school students could graduate with an associate degree. Is it realistic to go to the next step and offer these students a clear pathway to teaching as a career? Are colleges in Maryland doing what is needed to attract students to their education programs?
Well, the state in the blueprint provides additional support in terms of scholarships, fellowships, grants, and a variety of other things needed in order to attract teachers to the profession. But what Dr. McKnight said earlier, we want to make sure that the profession overall is attractive to people who want to go there. We have a new, for example, a career ladder. We need to give teachers more time for their own personal development. We want to provide additional pay. If we combine all of those things together, highly effective recruitment, additional financial support, and improving the status of teachers overall within our overall compared to other professions, I think that will provide us in time additional teachers to go into the profession, additional persons to go into the profession.
Mm-hmm. And we also have a number of initiatives that are also in place that gets at that very question. We have a program like ACES, which is one that our high school students go into, and they go over to Montgomery College to get general credits, and then they go over to USG. And one of the things that myself, as well as the leaders of both of those institutions have been working on is how, the fact that we're going to create a pathway that actually feeds teachers. We have this program also in our schools in which it's called the Maryland Teacher Program. And so we do have high school students who go into academy who want to go into the profession of teaching. And we need many more of them going into that program. So we're looking at ways to incentivize them. And one is financially, quite frankly, for them to be able to go and stay within the community locally to get all of the certifications that they need to come back into the classroom. I continue to say every single thing that we need in building the profession of teachers that we need, they're all sitting in our classrooms right now, okay? 161,000 of them. We just have to create the path that is one that is a path that does not seem burdensome or difficult for them to help move them into those pathways. So it's one that we're very excited about. And we're doing some very innovative things with all of the universities in the area, quite frankly. Like, for instance, some of the accelerators that we have in the budget, I've been talking and working with the dean of in the College of Education at University of Maryland, because we're also looking for them to become partners on some of the research that they do, and hoping that research will work together to bring more students into their programs who will then become our interns, looking to ultimately have them as paid interns so that when they are graduating with their degree, again, they're coming right into our classrooms, but they're familiar with our system, with our culture, with our students, and with our families. So lots of work happening in that space to build up our teaching profession right here in Montgomery County.
Judy, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I think we're at the end of the time.
Okay. That's all the time we have for questions and answers tonight. Thanks to all our esteemed presenters, and thank you to everyone watching tonight. A quick announcement. The League is inviting you all to a fundraising party at the Roundhouse Theater on March 27th from 5 to 7 p.m. The event features live music, wine and cheese, and raffle prizes. Please come to meet old friends, make new friends, and have a good time. Watch for ticket information on Eventbrite email or contact the League office at LWV. That's wrong. Oh, the League office at LWVMC@AROLS.com. If you enjoyed this free program and want to learn more about the League of Women Voters in Montgomery County, you can find out more about us, including how to support our efforts at LWVMOCOMD.org. With that, we say thank you again and good night.